Hi, I'm Caroline.
And I'm Adrian.
And this is Scandal Sheets. Hello and welcome to Scandal Sheets, the podcast dedicated to exposing the notorious people and places of the past. I am your host, Caroline.
And I'm Adrian.
And yes, your ears do not deceive you. The original theme song has just played, which means the Scandal Sheets podcast is back. Yay! Today we are relaunching the podcast with the story of Hedy Lamarr, a well-known American actress and scientist. One of the lesser known things about her. That's
super hot.
Definitely super hot. When people say that she was beautiful, 9 times out of 10, you look at a photo
of
someone
understatement.
And you think,
that's not quite the right word either. She was just, I don't even know. She was smoking hot. She was.
Girl crush.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. When people say, oh, she was gorgeous, and particularly in the past, and you look at the photograph or the painting and you're like, nah, not so much.
No.
Not the case
She was
here.
a handsome woman.
Yeah.
No, this lady was something else.
Just, I can't imagine like actually encountering her like in the flesh, because apparently she was just as gorgeous in the flesh. But anyway, she had a brain that definitely equaled her beauty, and struggled with that throughout her life, as we will soon see.
It's amazing that somebody that hot could be that brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's really not that fair.
It's terrible to say, but yes,
like, really?
And not
Seriously?
fair at all. Not fair at all.
Yeah, not fair, but such is life.
Yeah. I'm not saying hot people are necessarily dumb, but I'm saying she was brilliant, and that level of hotness plus that level of brilliance is like one in whatever. Millions.
So we are considering her scandalous, mostly due to some of her film choices that she made, and then some regrettable situations in her later life that tarnished her reputation. So that is why she has landed in the podcast. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. Hedy Lamarr was born Hedwig Eva Maria Kiesler.
Yeah, that's not the right name for her.
No.
Hedwig.
Hedwig is like the worst name.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah. Hedy was her nickname from a very early age. So she was born in Vienna, Austria on November 4th, 1914. She was the only child of an upper middle class Jewish Austrian family. Her father was a banker, while her mother was a concert pianist before she married. And she had come from an upper class Hungarian family. Hedy was educated in private schools, first in Vienna and later in Switzerland. She had the benefit of ballet, piano, and language lessons, along with an education in the natural sciences. Her father was very lenient with her, I guess. He coddled her, but in the best of ways. He spent time with her, often discussing science and machinery. Apparently, by the age of 5, she had disassembled her music box because she wanted to understand how it worked. So clearly, an inquiring mind, and she was not afraid to cause chaos to figure it out. Sort of like my husband. He apparently disassembled his parents' bed when he was 3 years old. So,
3?
Yeah. He was also, I think he also read Moby Dick by the time he was 10. So, yeah. My husband's brilliant, and I'm not afraid to say it. Anywho, Hedy's education, coupled with her upbringing in the cultured and intellectual environs of Vienna, resulted in a woman who was more than just a pretty face. As we mentioned, Hedy would eventually become known as the most beautiful woman in the movies. She had black hair, porcelain skin, and green eyes, And we will, of course, post pictures on Instagram so you can see how beautiful she really was.
Mm-hmm.
Though, as we just said, smoking hot. I said drop dead gorgeous, but smoking hot works too.
Yep.
Yeah. By the time she was a teenager, Hedy had developed a fascination with movies and acting. As an only child, she had often gotten her way. Can't imagine,
How? How's
only
that?
children. What we get our own way.
What?
So Hedy managed to finagle an introduction to Max Reinhardt, who was a well-known theatrical and movie director at this time. He was directing a play that required English-speaking characters, and Hedy spoke English somewhat.
Yeah. I'm sure they would have taught that in boarding school, right? She may have learned several languages.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know.
She was cast in this play, and when she wasn't on stage, she trained at Reinhardt's Acting Academy in Berlin. She actually spent very little time at the Acting Academy because she was almost immediately, being cast in other plays and movies. Her first role in a film came when she was only 16 years old.
Wow.
And it was in Reinhardt's Geld auf der Straße, which translates to Money on the Street. This film came out in 1930, and 2 years later, in 1932, 18-year-old Hedy landed her first starring role, and it would be a doozy. The movie was entitled Extase, which translates to ecstasy.
Oh.
It was about a young bride who married an older, wealthy man. She abandons her passionless marriage for an affair with a young, virile engineer. I find that kind of funny.
Engineers are virile?
Apparently. And pretty spicy for 1932, if I do say so myself. This movie has the dubious honor of being the first non-pornographic movie to show sexual intercourse.
Oh. What year is this again?
1932.
Whoa, that's really early.
Yeah.
That's scandalous.
But of course, showing sexual intercourse involved a close-up shot of Hedy's face while she was acting out an orgasm. So that was sexual intercourse. The movie also showed Hedy nearly nude, although it was not in a sexual scene. She was actually bathing in a lake naked, and her horse takes off with her clothes, and so it's very actually kind of more comical, if anything.
Sure,
but
it happens a lot.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm always taking a bath in a lake, and my horse takes off with my clothes.
Darn those horses!
Right. Needless to say, this film was quite scandalous, but it was extremely well received in terms of criticism. The Third Reich eventually banned it in Germany, ostensibly because it was lewd, but in reality, most of the cast was Jewish. So
that's another reason.
Gotta take that out. Overall, it got Hedy a lot of attention, as you might imagine. And it was during this wave of popularity that she met Fritz Mandl, an Austrian munitions manufacturer and dealer. He was head over heels in love with her, and after a brief courtship, and when I say brief, 3 weeks, she agreed to marry him. She was only 19, and this would be the first of many ill-timed and ill-advised marriages, as we will see. Upon becoming Mrs. Fritz Mandl in 1933, Hedy was introduced to a very high-flying lifestyle, probably more so than the one that she grew up in. Mandl had this tricked-out apartment in Vienna and a castle in the country. He lavished clothes and jewelry upon her. But in return, Hedy had to surrender her acting career. Of course, there's always
a catch.
Yeah. At first, this didn't seem to bother her, but as time went along, she became bored. Her primary responsibility was to entertain her husband's business associates, and though the conversation often revolved around the manufacture of weaponry, Hedy listened intently and took this information away, and it would come to help her many, many years later. Now, Hedy's reputation as a beautiful woman soon turned Fritz jealous and more than a bit paranoid. There's always been this rumor that there were, of course, several, maybe 1,000, maybe more than that, copies of Ecstasy, the movie, that got circulated around to various countries.
Can you find it now?
Yes, you can.
We should have watched that for our homework.
I know, we should have. He apparently paid large sums of money to acquire these dupes because he wanted them and he would destroy them when he got a hold of them. He didn't want his wife's, being ogled by anybody on the street. But then he later said that wasn't true. But, I don't know. As he traveled rather frequently, and sometimes without her, he left a battalion of servants behind to watch over her for her safety, of course.
Of course.
I, yes, have the police's every breath you take going through my head.
Right. Thank you.
By 1937, the couple had been married for nearly 4 years, and Hedy was bored out of her mind. Europe was also starting to feel the tight grip of Herr Hitler and the Nazi Party. While Fritz Mandl had been born a Jew, his mother had later converted to Catholicism, and he had done the same. Thus, he was able to enter into talks with the Nazi Party to supply them munitions. Hedy was horrified by the fact that her Jewish-born husband would have anything to do with a political faction that wanted to eradicate an entire race of people, a race that she, of course, belonged to. She'd also been struggling with depression in the wake of her beloved father's passing in 1935, so she was not in a good place. But she also decided that this was the time to fly, time to get the heck out of town. Her plan was launched one night when she and her husband were entertaining a high-ranking Austrian prince at their home. In anticipation of such an honor, Hedy had asked Fritz to give her all the jewelry that he'd ever given her. Like, he kept it locked up in a safe.
Yeah.
And so she asked for all of it. And she apparently wore, like, just tons, like, diamonds and emeralds and rubies and sapphires, all of it, all together. And, Fritz must have been vain, maybe even somewhat dense, if he didn't find this request odd. It just seemed, even though you're entertaining a prince, it just seemed, strange that you would want to wear all your jewelry. But after entertaining the prince for an hour, Hedy excused herself, claiming that she was feeling unwell. And once she was alone, she left the house and headed for a train, which would take her to Paris. She had planned to stay there long enough to file for divorce, but she soon heard that Fritz was after her, so she boarded another train and a boat and made it to London. Once she was there, she was finally free of Fritz. After arriving in London, Hedy heard through the great...
Don't stand so close to me, right?
Right. Oh, nice. After arriving in London, Hedy heard through the grapevine that Louis B. Mayer of the Metro Goldwyn Mayer studio, otherwise known as MGM.
Yeah.
He was in town recruiting actors and actresses who wanted to get the heck out of Europe before Hitler's ambitions resulted in a war. Hedy managed to get an appointment with Mayer, though this was not the first time she had met him. They had previously met in Vienna, and at the time, she had queried him on the possibility of becoming an actress in Hollywood. He had told her that it was impossible, that her performance in Ecstasy had preceded her and that no studio would take on an actress with such a reputation. Nonetheless, Hedy approached Mayer again, and this time she convinced him to hire her, but not so fast. Mayer offered Hedy $125 a week as a contract player for MGM. She thought this was a pitiful sum and that she was worth more, so she turned him down. Of course, I had to look that amount up in my handy-dandy inflation calculator.
Right.
And $125 in 1937 is worth $2,400 in 2021.
Wait, so she turned that down and she would have gotten that much a week?
A week. Yeah.
I guess she thought she knew what she was worth.
Yeah. So, although she had turned him down, she was not giving up. Mayer was scheduled to return to the United States on board the gorgeous Art Deco ocean liner, the SS Normandie.
Yeah.
So she booked a ticket in second class and decided that an ocean voyage was just what she needed to convince Mayer that she was worth way more than $125 a week. But before Adrian tells us about how fabulous it was to travel in the 1930s,
Absolutely,
we are going